So here we are at this security forum, and when we think about Canadian Forces, we know right now there are issues of recruitment, there are issues regarding equipment. I'm wondering how you would describe the state of Canadian Forces right now and its preparedness to answer the call if an ally should need our help.
So I think if we just take a step back and look at the themes that are emerging from this conference, it was very clear from all of the panels that the world is on the cusp of, or has already passed the cusp of a change in the international order. As we see what has been called in some corners a polycrisis of continuing emergencies, continuing crises around the world. And so that means that Canada is going to continue to be called into crises and have to deal with threats and risks around the world, but here at home as well. And so what that means for us in the Canadian Armed Forces is the demand signal has gone way up. The requirement to be able to respond to multiple crises, often concurrently, it really consumes our bandwidth in terms of planning, but moreover, we do not have the capacity to respond to everything. And so what that means is a few things. One, we've got to very much prioritize what we respond to, but two, we need to rapidly, urgently rebuild our readiness. And what do I mean by that? We take a look at the components of readiness. People. We are short people. And so recruiting and retention, reconstituting the Canadian Armed Forces from a people perspective, super important. Equipment. Our serviceability rates are low. That's a factor of having relatively old fleets in some cases, not the spare parts, not the maintenance contracts in place to be able to get that serviceability level. And it's across all elements, Army, Navy, if you take a look at our ships, aircraft serviceability in the Air Force, and so that needs to be fixed. And then sustainment. And what I mean by that are those enablers that allow us to do our job. Ammunition, critically low. Our infrastructure needs a lot of work. In some cases, it's in critical shape. And so all of those elements together form the basis of readiness that we need to work so much on, which will drive our ability to respond to these emerging crises. But the other stressor in the international environment, security environment, is a rapid technological acceleration of change. And we're seeing that play out in Ukraine right now. We're seeing it in the capabilities that countries like China are investing in. And so this has got the promise and the threat of dramatically changing the character of war. And so to remain relevant, there's new capabilities that we need to invest in to be able to operate and be relevant against the threats and be relevant to our allies.
Okay, but if an ally were to call on Canada to step up right now, how ready is Canadian Forces to answer that call?
Well, we would have to make some hard choices and stop doing something. And so if we were to focus in one part of the world, it would have to come at the expense of something else. Right now we're in the process of building up in Latvia to brigade level. That is consuming a lot of the capacity that's in the Army, not all of it, but the majority of it. We have increased our presence as part of the Indo-Pacific strategy in the Indo-Pacific region, and of course we're trying to do more in the Arctic. And so we're at that point where if we're going to be called upon to do something else, something would have to give.
Okay, but does it worry you though? Like, does it worry you that here we are, the federal government looking for savings, and among those savings, $1 billion from the D&D budget? Does that concern you?
Well, of course I'm worried. It's hard to get blood from a stone, and at a time when the international security situation is rapidly deteriorating around us, we should be going in the other direction in order to build that readiness, to build that relevancy that I talked about.
I wonder, as you talk about all these areas where Canadian Forces might be called upon to step forward, I wonder if it would be helpful, because it has been suggested, if Canada created a federal emergency management agency, or a FEMA like they have in the United States. Would that help to respond to the natural disasters here at home to free up Canadian Forces to deal with perhaps more international or global concerns?
No, yes it would. Given the increased frequency and intensity of natural disasters, the demand is going to be there. So what is required is more capacity, a humanitarian workforce, if you will, at the provincial and municipal level, and so that they can be that force of first choice. I have no doubt that the military, just given how prevalent these natural disasters are, the military will continue to be called. But let's be truly that force of last resort instead of what we are now, that force of first choice, that as soon as there's the threat of a disaster in a province, we've got provincial governments putting up their hand and calling for the military. No, we've got to be that true force of last resort, and there needs to be more capacity at other levels.
I wonder what your message is to Canadians, though, because I think many countries talk about defense. I don't know if Canadians speak about defense enough. But from what you've heard here, what do you want Canadians to know about Canadian forces and what we are called upon to do as a country and how we might move forward?
Well, firstly, we are the country's Canadian forces. And the world is rapidly changing. It's becoming much more dangerous. As we face this danger, it will require a whole of society effort. Canadian forces can't do this alone. And so we as a country, we as a society need to determine, is our country worth defending? And if so, do it. If so, ensure that your Canadian Armed Forces are ready. And that's going to require some decisions. But we can't do this alone. And as we take a look at the global security environment that's going to dramatically affect our country, dramatically affect our vital national interest of prosperity, if we don't do something about it, well, it's incumbent that we as a country act.
General Eyre, I appreciate the time today. Thank you for it.
Thank you.